Okay, so I thought I'd talk a little bit more specifically about the compassion meditation that I was learning about. This is just a little bit more of the detail. So what they did is Geshe Lobsang Tenzin Nege, I don't know if I say that, Nege. He's a Geshe and also a PhD, and he was a monk, obviously, but he's not now, and he teaches at Emory University, and he came up with this compassion meditation that is a combination of Lamrim and Lojong. So those are some of our main teachings in our tradition. And then he put it in a secular way. And he started off by saying that the main thing that they first work on in this is to change the person's perspective of reality. And in our what we do for that is we do that meditation on mind is the source of happiness and pain, where we recognize that our attitudes, our experience is dependent upon our attitudes, and we would say our previous karma. But it's basically this perspective of reality that causes us to have an inner shift where we really don't blame others for our experience. Of course we do that habitually, but we know that that's kind of a big lie. And we sit down on the cushion and start figuring out, like, wow, what did I bring to the table here? What were my attitudes? What was I thinking? And things like that. And so this creates quite a shift in how we relate to other people by doing this repeatedly. And he did say that for this kind of shift in your view or your attitude, obviously that will start to affect your behavior. But for that kind of understanding to affect your behavior spontaneously, it has to be very deeply ingrained. And that's why we practice. That's why it's meditation practice. So it starts with that kind of view, which is a kind of a different way for many people to think. We are so much thinking that our happiness is outside of us. And then so easily you can refute that just by if happiness was in the object, then I could start eating ice cream and just get happier and happier and happier the more I ate, because the happiness is in the ice cream, So, it's so easy to refute those things when you think about it. So they kind of start with that kind of framework, and then they first, as I was saying, they teach what they call attentional stability by breathing meditation. So basically helping a person to learn how to concentrate, focus their mind, make their mind receptive, basically developing mindfulness of the breath in this case, and then our introspective alertness, this little spy in your mind that tells you, well, am I really doing what I'm trying to do here? So they get that kind of going in people, which takes, of course, some time. Then they introduce the second main thing is then self-compassion. And this, I think, was their own development in a way, and something I think was useful. And so it had 4 or 5 parts here. The first one was understanding our own emotions and our own actions and how they relate to our own experience of suffering and happiness. So making that connection of our own, attitudes, our own behaviors, the things we do, this is what is making a big impact on our happiness and our suffering, which is not the way we often have thought about things. We think it's the other guy, They're the cause of my happiness. They're the cause of my suffering. And I always think, well, if that was so true, then when anyone went to a movie, everyone should come out with the same response, because you have the same conditions. But everybody walks out of a movie with different responses because they bring in different things to it. So that's just one small way to kind of refute that. Maybe not perfectly, but it kind of gets the point across. And then they go to try to gain the insight that this condition is what leads to our own suffering, and that can be changed. And that's what's so powerful about thinking this way, is that you can't change another person. But if I'm the cause of my own happiness and my own suffering, I can change myself. So that's a huge shift from maybe what you might call a victim mentality to a place of self-responsibility that works to help us become more happy as individuals and be able to set the basis for being more compassionate and loving. And then you gain confidence in your own ability to transform your thoughts, these kind of things, and then you resolve to do that. So that's their second part, and they call that self-compassion, which is, I think, a good term for it, because we have our own suffering, and we need to see, well, what is the cause of it? And we have our own happiness, and looking at the cause of that, and we want to be happy, and we don't want to suffer, so let's do that for ourselves. And later in the question and answering on this, His Holiness said, well, you really can't develop compassion for another person until you develop it for yourself. And you can't really understand another person's suffering until you understand your own. You have to understand suffering. If you make yourself blind to this, to your own suffering, by distracting yourself or choosing alcohol, drugs, whatever, you are limiting your ability to really take the meaning of suffering. And that's what's useful, is suffering isn't that beneficial, but understanding suffering is very beneficial.